The new podcast featuring the female forces in sports media. I'm your host, Kelly Burke, and joining me today is one of those female forces, Monica McNutt, who is literally everywhere right now in sports media. She's an analyst and studio host for ESPN, ACC Network, Fox Sports, and MSG Networks, just to name a few. And she also hosts a weekly podcast, Buckets, Boards, and Blocks for Pure Hoops Media. Monica, it is so good to see your face, girl.
Oh my gosh, Kelly, this is long overdue. Thanks for having me on the pod.
Thank you. Your Twitter bio says on the grind. And I think that fits you so perfectly because you're involved in so many different things. So how do you juggle all your various roles?
So it's funny, Kel, and you can relate to this, both of us having played ball in college. It's very much still the same. Especially for me during basketball season, which is the bulk of the work that I do over the course of a year. And although there are moments where I'm like, what time is my flight? What city am I in? Like, what's going on here? It's a season. And honestly, we really probably get going late November, we'll call it mid-December to March. I mean, you've got to make it happen in that window of time. And so I draw back onto being an athlete and how much I loved that. And then honestly, the droughts in the journey in terms of this is literally what I've prayed for and what I've grinded to get to. So I dare not complain. Like, there's too much work to be done.
So when we're not in a pandemic, so to say, and it is the normal basketball season, November through April, what is your typical grind? What is your typical week looking like right now?
So I was home usually for at the most 2 days, at least one for sure. But sometimes I would be turning right back around the next day. I would be in New York. Usually Tuesday, Wednesday, I had to be in Connecticut on Thursday, game on Friday, game on Sunday. Home, hopefully Sunday night, depending on what time the game goes. You know how that goes.
Yeah.
And then, unpack, repack, and hit it again. So that rhythm for me was usually NBA at the top of the week, college in the middle, college on the weekend, and then back to NBA. So
basketball season, obviously, it came to an abrupt end this year because of COVID. So what are the big realizations that you have had in these last few months where you've had time to reflect on everything?
I think taking things for granted has sort of been the thing that is a recurring theme, whether it is the opportunity to call a game, whether it's the opportunity to play in a game, even down to the things that we don't enjoy, right? Like, so often you hear, tomorrow's not promised. And I think that doesn't really resonate unless you've been closely affected by a sudden tragedy. And while for some folks in this country, actually, COVID has been an absolute tragedy. But thankfully, I'm happy to report that I am well and whole, and so is my circle. Things change on a dime. And you don't get the moments back. So whether it is to be fully present in that moment, making eye-to-eye contact with someone, or truly taking a moment to enjoy what you've accomplished in the arena that you're in, whether it's, putting that new idea out there because it was predicated on X, Y, and Z, and you no longer have X, Y, and Z anymore, like, you've got to take advantage of every moment fully.
Yeah. For me, I know it's made me appreciate what we get to do even more. Has that been the case for you too?
Yeah. 100%. 100%. But I think this season for me in particular, I made it a point to be present. I would leave events pinching myself. Our crew at ACC Network, literally my homegirls, like, I can't believe so many nights. I can't believe I'm going to get a check for having so much fun. Like, this is going to be awesome. But I think it also has made me empathize a little bit more. Mm-hmm. While I have experienced layoffs and tried to navigate this industry, the feeling of uncertainty that has come with this window of time is something that's different. It's very different.
Yeah, I think because there's so much unknown. Even now, like, we don't have any idea when we're going back. We don't know what basketball season's going to look like.
And then even in that, in returning, as I'm reading and doing my part to be educated, whether you agree with Kyrie in that we shouldn't return to sports because of the moment in terms of social justice, or whether you agree with Dr. Fauci, who says, I don't see the NFL returning unless they can figure out a way to do it in a bubble, wherever you stand on that, I mean, we're at a really interesting place, Kel. Like, in terms of the ethics, I just as much as you would love to be back to work. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I can't begrudge a WNBA player who opts out of this season because she's got small kids, or an NBA player that does the same thing. You know what I mean? Or for Malcolm Jenkins to say NFL players are not essential, because they're not. And I get the economic trickle down, whether it be college sports or pro sports, but 40 plus million people are out of work. And COVID has been the great equalizer. If that means that pro athletes are out of work for a season, welcome to existence in America, that you can't hide behind your wallet.
Yeah. Absolutely. Monica, you played basketball for Georgetown, then you got your master's from Maryland. What did your early journey from post-basketball career into broadcasting look like?
Oh, man. It looked like this naive, young, hungry, energetic kid that has a good shot in this business, but she thinks she's better than she is at this moment. Remember graduating, and at our final press conference, we lost to UConn by 6 in Philadelphia at the Sweet 16 in 2011. Literally saying at the end of the press conference, like, all right, well, I'm a senior now and I'm not going pro, but I'd like to get into media. So if any of you guys want to help me out, like, I'd appreciate it. And Patrick Stevens and someone else, I can't remember who else, actually did give me their cards. And so we've sort of connected through the years. But I remember feeling like I should be anchoring sports in DC. Like, I grew up here, like I played sports here, like, let's go. Seasoning, polish, I didn't care about those things. I just thought I was supposed to be doing it. And so now, approaching 10 years in the game, I get it. And seasoning and polish, those are things that you can't fake. Either you have it or you don't. So I just keep thinking back to Malcolm Gladwell in terms of the 10,000 hours. And so the reps, like having gotten the reps now, I'm proud of who she was in 2011. Yeah. But we definitely have a little bit more wisdom now.
Yeah. And sometimes that naivety, it can serve you well to a point early on. So.
Mm-hmm. I think people that met me early on, and it's funny, I did a podcast with Mike Wise last week, and he was one of those people. And afterward, he shot me a note, and he's like, yo, like, it's crazy to see how much you've grown. He's like, I remember you laying all over the golf course at a Washington football event for NBC4 as an intern. He's like, and look at you now. And so the things I think that were good about that age for me, confidence. I think I was hungry and willing to work. And those traits, while I'm finally sort of getting on and I'm proud of the progress I've made, those traits have had to remain constant throughout the journey because the hustle don't stop. It just changes forms.
So true. What has been your experience as a Black woman in sports media?
Oh, man, Cal. Whew.
I know that's a broad question, but and we'll get into more of the racial and social justice stuff later in the podcast. But just as far as the sports media part of it, I'm curious.
So I had a unique upbringing in that I'm from Prince George's County, which is one of the pockets in the country where Black folks live well. So like my doctors, dentists, my mom was very diligent and intentional about putting Blackness around us. So in 10th grade, when I went to an all-girls school that was predominantly white, even then, I knew that I was a minority, but I was not ill-equipped. Like I was still confident. I had been well prepared. It was just now just a different setting. When I got into sports media, I remember thinking, I'm good. Like, that's it. I'm an athlete, right? Like, if you're an athlete, you can score, you can defend, you get on the floor. When I got into the game, I was like, I'm good. Like, let's go. So it wasn't until I would apply to jobs, maybe get an interview, maybe not get an interview. I'd go back and look when the positions are filled and look that, oh, they were looking for a woman, but she doesn't look anything like me, that it started to register. Now, there's an interesting balance in that, Kelly, because, again, part of that is, okay, she does have a couple more years of experience than me. Like, very rarely was it an exact same thing. And it's a subjective industry, so it's not fair to say, oh, they were looking for a white woman. However, I have left plenty of interviews or had plenty of conversations with news directors and thought to myself, they're not really serious about diversity. Like, they may not be ready for my look because my hair has always been short. Like, bright lipstick is always a thing. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so I remember when I left my job in West Palm Beach with the American Sports Network, which is no longer, really thinking, are you serious? Are you going to keep this look? And this part of me is not something that I was willing to sacrifice for the business. And I feel strongly that things don't change unless you push the envelope. And so do I think that I've hit lulls in my career attributed to being a Black woman, particularly a Black woman with short hair? Yeah. But when I look at the grand scheme of things, I wouldn't change a thing.
You've always rocked your hair. Like, I just love it. Like, I love that you've always stayed true to who you are. And you've always been somebody, even from when I first met you, like, that's spoken up and not been afraid to push the envelope and to say what you feel. And
Yeah.
I mean, how can you not respect that?
I love that. And I do think the tide is changing. And you mentioned all that's going on in our society in 2020. I think that all of that is important. But the other part of it is, because I know that I'm pushing a little bit in a non-traditional way, I'm mindful to be prepared. You know what I mean? Like, please don't call me for no NHL or golf job. Like, that's just not my strong suit. We're not gonna play one another. Like, that's not it. But if you get me in my wheelhouse, let me show you what I can do. And if you want me to go with NHL and golf, let's get a strategy so that we both come out of this looking like smart people and not, oh, she didn't belong there. So I think some of the grace that I have now and the understanding I have now, literally, like, hell, it only comes with time. You know what I mean? And I think it's tough for young women in this business because you want to push, you want to work. And especially for us as athletes, it's like, I want to shoot this shot in a game. I practice this shot in practice. Like, here's the game, let's go. And it's not always a 1+1 in this industry.
I was listening to an interview you did recently, and you talked about how you've been very calculated in your career. And so what did you mean by that?
That is me being true to myself, like you said. When I got a job here in DC as an MMJ for the cable sister station to the ABC affiliate, I had a photographer say to me, McNutt, is that your real name? Are you going to change it? And I was like, change it? Why would I do that? He's like, you're not going to get like more TV last name? I was like, no, like, that's my last name. It's my dad's name. It's my grandfather's name. Like, no. And so the hair thing for me is sort of in that same space. I felt like, especially for us as women, Kelly, while being a journalist is something that I'm very proud of and that I pour my heart and soul into, it is not the only facet of me. And so to do anything to my look that is not true to me on behalf of this job is a sacrifice that I'm just not willing to make. Yeah. Fitness is important to me. I get up in the morning and my hair works from fitness. You know what I mean? Like, Blackness is important to me. My hair to me represents that and the confidence in that. And so I think as we get older, the quicker we can learn what our no's are, the more true to ourselves we can be as we navigate.
It's interesting that you say that, because I can remember earlier in my career, maybe mid to late 20s maybe, and I had an agent at the time, and I remember he said to me, Kelly, you need to get Botox in your forehead because you have expression lines. And I remember I was so offended. I'm like 28. Like, I don't have any wrinkles on my face. Like, what do you mean I need Botox? But you're right. It's such a subjective industry.
It's totally subjective. It's totally subjective, Kelly. And like, it's subjective for women, period. And then like, there's another layer for being a Black woman. There's probably another layer for being an LGBTQ woman. Like, there's so many layers of it. But I think the beauty of where we are now, and even for myself included, I love being on TV. Like, it's great. But there is a part of me that's like, all right, how do I navigate my way to a talent office? How do I begin to plant seeds and grow in terms of being able to produce? Because behind the camera is really the people that yield the power. So if I'm in a position to hire diverse talent and empower diverse talent, that's where it matters. And right now, I feel strongly that my role is to be an example of that, because I love when other young women hit me up and are like, hey, like, I love your hair, I love your look, I love what you're doing, whatever. But I'm full picture, big picture, like, I get it. Like, the power is really behind the camera.
When I think of you, I always think of two things. I always think of energetic. You just always bring enthusiasm, and then the hustle. Like, you're always on the grind, and you just have, like, even from when you're first starting off, you have this unique presence to you. I think so many times with young broadcasters, when you start in the industry, you're trying to copy other people and you're trying to emulate other people. So how did you go about really developing your unique style?
I just think I knew my nose, Kelly. Like, so as an athlete, I was an English major. I took a couple journalism classes at Georgetown, but really didn't have the skill set that I wanted. And I remember distinctly thinking, okay, I don't want to be pegged as just an analyst. So I met George Solomon, who was like my journalism godfather. He just retired. I love him. And I got a fellowship at the University of Maryland for my program. So I went and got equipped so I can do the whole MMJ deal. But I remember at one point in grad school thinking, I hate the reporter voice. Like, I hate that stuffy, like, and we're here on the scene, and like, I hate the reporter voice. And to me, it doesn't make you sound like you know what you're talking about or not, right? And so I decided then that I wasn't going to do the reporter voice. And I was already set on my hair. I was like, all right, here we go. I just think I have been able to rely on hard work and the abilities. And I think when you are confident in what you bring to the table, it's hard to waver. I mean, not that we don't all, have moments where we've got frogs in our throat, but I can't say that the most intentional thing that I have done is my hair. But in terms of truly finding my voice, I just try to be as prepared as I can be. And I don't pose like I know more than I do. Like, some of my favorite moments in commentary have literally been questions that I've either posed to my other panelists or whatever. Like, just hear me out. Follow this thought process with me. So I just think doing the work and knowing that you're prepared allows you to be confident in who you are.
Monica, what do you think makes a good analyst?
Oh man, it depends on what you want. It depends on as much as I love Doris, like, I don't think I could ever be Doris. I mean, and you know what, Kelly, this question is crazy too, because I'm always fascinated by Twitter reaction to whatever NBA analysts we're listening to versus us who play, because I'm like, y'all are blown away by that? Like, you couldn't see that? But I forget that, like, I'm a basketball player, you know what I mean? I think a good analyst is someone that brings insight. How you do it, there's a variety of ways. But I also have realized at this point in the game, you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea, right? So there may be people that says, oh, she cracks too many jokes, so she's having too much fun. Like, all right, that's fine. But did I mess up a stat? Did I, you know what I'm saying? If you actually were listening, did I give you some basketball knowledge? Like, I think insight is what makes a good analyst. And I think the camaraderie between your play-by-play person really comes through. Like, if people can tell you're having fun, I think that amps up a broadcast.
I think you're so right on that. And plus, it just makes it way more fun for you if you do well with your play-by-play.
I have fun, Kelly. Like, I have fun. And again, like, you talk about finding my own voice. I have just decided I'm going to be me, and I'm going to prepare as me. Does that mean so-and-so network might not want me? Maybe. But here's these other two that do want me. And that's okay, too.
What have you really worked to improve?
Not talking so fast. And it is still an ongoing point of focus for me, particularly when we get into the panel and debate sort of space, because the energy is like, oh, let's go, let's fast, I'm so excited. And I think you got to remember, it's not just the analyst you're talking to, or you're not just having a conversation with yourself. You've got to get through the medium of the television. So definitely talking slower is something that I've had to be mindful of.
Monica, you mentioned American Sports Network, and that was several jobs ago. It seems like a million years ago, but it wasn't that long ago. It was like, I don't know, 3 years ago or something.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a time after your contract ended there and ASN had folded that I remember you and I had emailed back and forth, and you weren't sure what was next. You were trying to find your footing, and there was a lot of unknowns. But I do remember you told me you were excited and you were confident for whatever was coming. Mm-hmm. And so how do you feel like that was a defining time in your career?
Kelly, that season was everything. And if I had known what I was about to go into, I don't know that I would have wrote that to you in the email. Man, Kelly, let me give you a little backstory on that. In 2015, I was laid off for the first time from the local station that I worked at here in DC. I had a job less than 60 days after that layout. In fact, I probably had the offer within 30 and everything went final. It took about 60. So the second layoff, again, maybe naive, like whatever. I was like, oh, no big deal. Like, I've been there, done that. Like, I'll land a job in 6 months, right? Little did I know that was not going to be the forecast. And so again, we talk about acknowledging that we are more than our jobs. I came back to DC. I had a family stuff going on, left like crazy. And so that first 9 months while I was home, I really wasn't locked into the job thing at all because I had so much going on with my family. So when I started to turn the tables back to the job piece, it wasn't happening quick at all. Like, Kelly, I was substitute teaching. Like, I teach cycle as a side thing, but my side thing became one of my main hustles. Like, I'm teaching 5 classes a week, like, just trying to make it work. And I remember being like, God, like, am I going to go back to doing this full time, or is this just going to be a passion project from now on? Because, like, I mean, I got degrees. I can go teach English and, like, hustle to the Wizards game at night if I need to. But, like, I'm good. Like, I very vividly remember watching Maria Taylor and being like, she's good, but, like, I'm not that far away from that. Like, I'm just not, right? And so for me, that 2 years, about close to 2 years, 18 months for sure, that span of time was so important because it reminded me of who I am outside of what we do, right? Like, when you get laid off, they're always like, oh, don't take it personal. Like, it's just company right-sizing. But I think because literally what we produce is us being there, journalists in particular are especially tied to the work in terms of our identity and our value. So, like, for me, I was like, I can't date right now. Like, I'm just trying to get my life together. I remember telling my friends, I'm not checking for no dude unless his name is Bob the Job. Like, that was my mantra. Like, I was so locked in. And so it was really, for me, my faith was huge in that season because it was about I don't want to say rebuilding, but it was a reminder of who I am and my value apart from what I do. Like, I had honestly, Kelly, gotten to a place where I was like, all right, well, if I go teach English and coach high school basketball and have a blog, like, my life is going to be okay. Like, I'm going to have a good life. There are people that love me, and I know guys got me. I didn't want that, but, like, I had literally relinquished control. So the other part of that was the pride. So in December of 2020? So December 2018, I remember tweeting out my reel and being sort of embarrassed because I'm like, people know me. Like, I'm supposed to have a job by now. So I tweeted out my reel. Didn't go full on viral, but I remember Maria Taylor and Jamel Hill retweeting it and both saying really encouraging things about look out, like, she's up next. And Maria actually messaged me aside and was like, yo, like, I think you're dope. Don't stop. Like, keep pushing. I want to say that same week, I got a call from FS1. That was I gotten a 6-game package from them, but I was like, oh, they're just throwing me a bone. Like, I can't live off this. But they called me because they had a top 10 women's matchup open up and they need an analyst. Nice. So in my mind, I was like, okay, well, he's not just throwing me a bone. Like, if he's going to put me on his top 10 game, he must think I'm legit. So really, that was sort of the dominoes that started to fall as things found in place for me. But I also, that same December, was applying to teach English at a charter school in D.C.
I was looking at old emails you and I had exchanged, but I swear we even had, like, a phone conversation or maybe a text one, like, years ago during this time. And I remember almost being worried because I think one of the conversations we had, you kind of said, well, maybe I'm going to get out of the business, or you were not sure that you were meant to be in it. And I remember I was shocked because I'm like, no, like, you have what it takes. And that's what's been so exciting is to watch your star rise since then, because I think all of us that are friends with you and know you knew you always had it in you. So many of us go through some point in our career where we do, like, a gut check, like, am I really supposed to be doing this? Maybe I should just get a 9-to-5 job.
And we need to be honest about that as women. We definitely did have a conversation, and I probably did. Yes, you're right. I think, Kelly, the other part of the other reason I would not change it is because it made, again, compassion really relatable. When I'm talking to my mentees, just graduated, trying to figure it out, like, no, baby, I understand. Like, I grossed $22,000 in a year, and for real, I understand. I literally was there. And the other part of it, though, Kelly, and again, especially us as women, if I had decided to pivot, that it's also okay as long as you have been true to yourself. You know what I mean? Like, I'm thankful that I was able to hang in there, and I actually had a friend who was like, Mom, like, for real, like, if you do that, we're not friends anymore. Like, you got it. You got to keep pushing. But at the same time, that's not all of our stories. And we can't shame one another about making changes because life has a way of dictating what's next. And it's our job to respond in the way that is healthiest for us.
Absolutely. I think too, especially if you are a person, if you don't have any regrets, then you know what, you do you.
Mm-hmm.
Monica, what's been key to getting to that national level now?
Oh man, networking. That's the truth. Like, networking. And just kind of networking and being prepared. When I got the call, so I first met Pat Lowry, who was the coordinating producer at ESPN. You know Pat.
Yeah.
I met her over the phone. She called me March of 2020. She called me March 2019. And look, girl, like this is when things are starting to come back together, but not all the way together. Like I had literally sat down, just done my budget, paid all my bills. Bill collectors were calling because of a credit card that I just didn't have it at the time. So I'm looking at my phone, this number is calling me from Hartford. I literally, Kelly, will never forget it. I was sitting on my couch. I was like, God, I literally just paid all my bills. Like, who is this? Like, I have no other money. I just paid all my bills. Who is calling me? Hello? Hi, is this Monica? Yeah, this is Pat Lowry, the coordinator producer from ESPN. Oh, I know who you are. How may I help you? So she called me on like a Wednesday night and needed me to come down to the SEC tournament to do studio that weekend. And I was like, I have to fly out to LA for Fox on Sunday. She's like, so can you come down, watch games on Friday, do studio for me on Saturday, and we'll get you out of there? I'm like, yes, hands down. So that was like being prepared in that moment. When I left that event, she's like, you were great. I would have slowed you down on your talking a few times, but you were great. And you'll hear from us when we launch ACC. Like that was the first seed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Again, like being prepared. I had shot her emails before. She had never responded. I had networked feverishly with the ACC commissioner, Debbie. I can't remember Debbie's last name, but she wasn't a commissioner, but she was high up in the ranks of the ACC. I had given her my resume, link, email, connected. And for a long time, those seeds lay dormant, right? Until they didn't. And when they popped, Kelly, they popped. So, I mean, the same kind of thing happened with MSG. I did a project with Overtime. One of my friends is one of their main talents there, Chloe Pavlik. She's like, Mom, send me a resume. They're trying to do this project here. I think you'll be great for it. Producers agreed. We did that broadcast in conjunction with MSG Networks. I'm literally sending an email probably like 2 weeks later. Hey, MSG, like it was a pleasure working with you guys. Just want to stay in touch. Again, having learned to let go of that pride. If you have any projects, like I'm available and interested. 5 minutes later, your ears must have been itching. We were just talking about you. And so that's how I got on with the MSG 150 show. So much of this game has been networking and being prepared to take advantage of the moments when they come.
That's really good advice. Do you have an agent?
And now I have an agent.
Okay. So when did you feel like you needed one?
So this will be my third agent, the first agent that I've actually paid, though. My first agent was more of like a mentor. I'd heard really good things about her. She was connected when ESPN was coming up. And she would give me feedback on my work, but there was never, look what you brought me. My second agent, he came highly recommended from a friend, but I was not mindful of my friend's goals. She's a local news anchor. So he wasn't connected to the spaces that I wanted to be connected to. This agent, I only signed with this person because my very first agent, who is now a dear friend, was like, okay, it's time. Like you're getting to that level. I mean, you're working in New York, you're doing national games, like it's time. And what I connected with her, when I connected with her, the thing I loved, going back to being an athlete, is she gave me constructive feedback off the break. Like that was our first conversation. I like that you did this. I would like you to work on this, blah, blah, blah. Like that was in our first conversation, unsolicited. So that really meant a lot to me. But I'm 30 now, and I've been in the industry in some capacity since 2011 when I graduated, and I just signed with the agent. And to be completely transparent, I trust her most moving forward. A lot of what was on the table this year, and I said to her, we're teammates in my mind. Yeah. This is the door I'm knocking on. This is the door I need you to come kick behind me. You know what I mean? So we work together. Yeah. I think some people think that when you get an agent, you just get to kick it. No. Yeah. We're very much working together. Like these are the people that I hit up. Can you follow up on them? She's brought me stuff to reach out to people. Like I'm in XYZ. I know that this person is XYZ. Can you get us a meeting? And so the gig she brought me the deal with Turner that I had this year, which was fantastic. But again, that started because, hey, I'm at this conference. I know that Tara August is here. Can you get her attention? Yes. Like here's your meeting. Be there. We followed up after the meeting and so on and so forth. So I would tell young people to get the reps first. Because I am now paying my agent, and I'm happy to pay her because she's protecting me, but there's an alignment. An agent only wants to work with you if you can bring them some money too. I
think it's important to note too, like some of that early, even national stuff you were getting, it's stuff that you got yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You got to hustle. Like I don't want, when I went through my drought, as I like to speak of it, I will say my growth period. I remember thinking that we need to do a better job of being completely honest about this business. Whether it's you and I having a conversation over our similar challenges as women in the industry, whether it's me telling you my challenges as a Black woman in this industry, whether it's navigating how to freelance, what are my rates, what's really good with an agent. Like, we need to do a better job of being honest with the people that are in our circle about what we're going through, because you can help one another. And I think there's so much power in transparency, not with people that don't sincerely have your interest, but with your circle, with people that think like you and are trying to move like you. Honestly, Kelly, from that drought, like, that was the season of my life that I also really grew to being able to root for other Black women and not think first, oh man, if she got it, they don't want me. Like, they already met their Black person. You know what I mean? Just to be able to go into it with gratitude for seeing another diverse face and understanding that if I continue to move with diligence and integrity, what's for me is going to be for me.
You have a new series coming out that I'm super excited about. It's with Good Sport. It's called Onks, Celebrating Black Women in Sports, and it's going to launch in mid-July. What can you share about that project?
I'm so excited about Onyx. Like, here's the deal. So Paul Brimmer, the founder of GoodSport.me, is a Hoya. So we actually met on some alumni event. I don't even know how I met Paul, but we stayed in touch over the years. Like, he obviously knew me from local TV till now. And he's like, Monica, I got this idea I want to run by you. So he mentioned it, and I was like, I love it. Like, Onyx is going to celebrate Black women in sports, whether it's the media side, behind the scenes, digital, team side, all of it. I'm just so excited to tell those stories. We've got a great list of guests. I'm really excited to touch in with some folks that people already know, but also introduce people to some folks behind the scenes that are not as well known, because again, representation is so important. If women knew the Washington football team's digital account was run by a Black woman, like, that's another job for you. You know what I mean? Everything is not in front of the camera with the mic. Or if they knew that the producer of NBA Countdown, the studio show, is a Black woman, like, that's another avenue for you. So I'm so excited.
I do want to talk about everything going on in our country, and there's a whole lot to unpack there. George Floyd, obviously, he was not the first Black man to die at the hands of the police. But why does this time and the outrage and the public reaction, why does it feel different this time?
Because of this exact moment, Kelly, right? Like, I flip it back to you. It's not the first time. And maybe you're an outlier, but how many times have you had a conversation with the Black folks in your circle after it happened?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, not a ton.
Right. So it's as sad, terrifying, uncomfortable, deadly, quite honestly, as COVID has been, it has forced our country to look at the breaches, the inequities in our society. Whether we're talking about healthcare, whether we're talking about revenue, income disparities, COVID has forced us to stop and take a look. And I think the perfect storm of COVID and the divisive nature of the current White House administration culminated in a moment in which Black folks are home, a good portion are out of work, and they got time. As we like to say, I got time today. And so that's why we saw 14 days of consecutive protests. But I am so empowered and hopeful because those protests were not all Black people. It was you and I represented out there. It was a diverse group of people who acknowledged, wait a minute, we need to do something in this country. I've heard people say that the sheer coldness of that video did something. I didn't watch it because I don't need to see it. That video to me was Philando Castile in Minneapolis 3 years ago now, whose girlfriend and her daughter are in the car. Like, I don't need to see that again to know the way this country views Blackness. But I am empowered because this is a moment in time where people can decide which side they want to be on. My concern, I will say though, is how we keep it moving forward and that it's not just a trend.
I made myself watch the video through the whole thing. And I mean, I cried. It was awful to watch. It was disgusting.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's four officers involved. Like,
and none of them are doing anything.
None of them are doing anything. And was your goal to restrain this man or was it to kill this man? Like 8 minutes and 46 seconds? You know what I mean? So, and Kelly, it's so, I do feel that's important that I let people know I would never be anything other than a Black woman, because I could imagine someone looking in as these things have been brought to the forefront and really been like, wow, like it's rough to be Black. It's true, but I wouldn't change who I am and being a Black woman for the world. But it took all of this. Like, this is why, for me, people that flippantly tossed off Kyrie's idea of not resuming the season as a move to stand in solidarity and not allow the country to go back to being distracted irritate me, because whether you like or dislike Kyrie, he's actually correct. We're not going to get another pandemic. Like, this is every 100-year occurrence. We will not get a moment like this again. Now, I'm not naive. It's the combination of the risk of COVID and the social justice movement that make it an opportunity for some guys to sit out. I'm not naive about that, but you can't toss that aside. Like, you can't toss that aside, because we hide behind sports so many times. And as much as we want to say sports has a way of unifying, the last 4 years in the NFL, there was no unity for Colin Kaepernick. And there's still, moving forward, are some things that have to be worked out in terms of the fact that we haven't heard from many presidents or team owners or presidents, right? Yeah. So we have work to do. I'm proud that people are starting to acknowledge the disparities and inequities, but it can't stop here. Like, this is just the beginning.
What I find interesting about the Kyrie situation and the people saying stuff and criticizing his opinion, look, Maya Moore, she's already done that. She's already done that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And she, like, I don't think people we obviously love women's basketball, but we're talking about LeBron, like, stepping away. Like, Maya Moore is not somebody's bench rotation player. You know what I mean? But again, and that's a whole nother layer of the conversation in terms of where Black women fall in the societal totem pole. I think Maya is so great and is such a unicorn, and I mean that in the most complimentary way. She had a very specific goal that she was going after when she stepped away. And to her credit, she has achieved it. And perhaps this moment seems a little bit nebulous, but the issues that need to be rectified in our society, like, across the board. And I keep telling my friends, like, guys, just understand, anything bad that happens in our country, like, it disproportionately affects Black people. Look at the COVID numbers. Like, anytime anything bad happens, just look at the numbers. And that's not because we're not trying. That's because of American history includes 400 years of slavery, and then you move from slavery into Jim Crow and sharecropping, and the system has never really been in our favor. Like, there's a reason that Amy Cooper felt like she could call a police officer, which we all have the right to do, but she could have this man who was actually in the right, and Christian Cooper, taken care of, right? Like, this is the system that we have to acknowledge. And I'm not saying all cops are bad, but all Black people not bad either. Like, there's no instance that has been in the news or the headlines where a Black person has lost their life that you can justify in my mind. Zero. Not when we can get on the internet and find viral videos of white dudes, like, high on whatever, full on fighting the cops, and they manage to live. That's not it.
How has your gamut of emotions over the last couple months allowed you to find strength to speak out, to stand up for what you believe is right?
Wow, Kelly. I don't know that I've always had it under control. I'll be honest. I'm fortunate enough that the people in my circle understand, but I was doing a podcast and sort of lost it. Not in a mean and aggressive way, but as much as I appreciate my producer, even the way that he was discussing diversity was from an entitled white man's perspective, right? Like, he could say, oh, pat myself on the back. I love when there's a room full of people that don't look like me. When I say that, literally my lifeblood and the vitality of my career and my opportunities is contingent on someone being willing to have a diverse room. You know what I mean? Like, and so I shared that with him, and we've talked since, and he's a dear friend and I love him. And he's like, Monica, I want you to know that I heard you. And Kelly, girl, when I got emotional, like, I was like, Bruce, I'm sorry. Like, I love you. You know I love you, Bruce. I didn't mean to go there. But there's just these moments of boiling over. I think the first time we did an MSG show as these things were unfolding, it was sort of cloaked in, what can we learn from sports? And Kelly, I swear to you, it's 4 of us on the show. I was going to be the third person to talk. My leg was shaking, because I didn't know what I was about to say. Like, in my mind, I'm like, yo, this is bullshit. Like, thank you, God. Sorry for cussing. He, like, literally, it was like, God, because the comment that came from me was, sports gets heated too. And I don't know about y'all, but when I've been on the best teams, the locker rooms get heated. There are arguments, there are fights, but those are the moments that you can grow from. Because I was doing my best to keep it as sanitized for that space as I could. But I was like, all right, I truly believe that. Like, I believe that this is a moment where we're having a fight in our locker room. and we can grow from it. But it's crazy. Like, even today we had the conversation about Malcolm Jenkins versus Tom Brady. Tom Brady throwing out the FDR quote in that we only need to fear fear versus Malcolm Jenkins saying, which I agree, whether people want to hear it or not, the NFL is not non-essential. To me, the post from Tom Brady, again, entitled. Like, I understand that you are competitive and we argue that you're the GOAT in the NFL, but you also are a white man who is not in touch with this. If you look at the numbers on COVID, a black person is 5 more times likely to have the disease. So what does that mean? That means that Malcolm Jenkins and I don't know the percentage exactly, but let's just go with 70 to 80% of the NFL that are black are more likely to have an auntie, cousin, grandma, friend of a friend, their high school coach who has been affected by this disease. So it doesn't touch you in the same way. So you can say the only thing I have to fear is fear. Nah, dog, like, look at these numbers. So, and again, it's happening now. Like, there are moments that I feel myself getting warm, my heart beating fast. And so on one hand, I'm proud of being able to navigate that space, and largely the feedback has been good. But I'm also thankful that I'm at home, right, and can go and debrief. Because if I was in a studio somewhere, Kelly, like, there would probably be moments I'd be like, yo, let me get the green room and get by myself. Like, just let me get the green room. Because I appreciate people talking about it from an educated place or a place of compassion. But you've never been a black woman. I've never been a black man. You know what I mean? And so don't come at me on how or why or should. And again, even me as a black woman, the black experience is not monolithic. But I'm far more likely to understand the pain than anybody that doesn't look like us. You just don't get it. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm reading the book White Fragility.
Oh,
right
she's
now.
great.
It's really good so far. It's really interesting. But I'm curious, why do you think so many white people have such a hard time talking about and understanding white privilege and Black Lives Matter?
Why would you, Kelly? You know what I mean? Like, so the conversation has often turned to how to be an ally. And I'm happy to discuss that. But I think of the gamut of emotion goes from angry to compassion, back to angry, and up and down. Overall, I'm compassionate and I'm willing to have these conversations. There's a whole sect of black folks that's like, no, don't talk to me, just go get a book and Google, right? I don't think that's the whole story. But I do, for myself personally, I think of the LGBTQ community. Mm-hmm. I don't identify in any of that. And so some of the issues that they are well-versed in, I'm not in, because that's not my life. And so the same for white people to a degree, right? Like, the American way is to think, I've worked hard, I earned all the good things that come to me. It's not to think my skin has been an aid in my success. I know that my skin is a detriment, but I also am in a unique position as a black person, because like I said, I grew up fully empowered as a black person. When I move into spaces, I move with the confidence and an attitude about being black, a good attitude, as opposed to, oh, I need to shrink away and know this moment. But in the same breath, like, I'm very well versed in code switching as well. You know what I mean? Like, I know there's some spaces that can't be full on black power. Like, I gotta be professional. So I think the American experience is not to put ourselves in other people's shoes. It's to work hard, pick ourselves up by our bootstraps, and celebrate what we accomplished with our stick-to-itiveness, because we're proud to be Americans. And so the compassion is missing. Quite honestly, the history is missing. Black History Month, if it is still celebrated in whatever area people live in, is 28 days. Black history is not Black history. Black history is American history. And it's so funny because, like, I had the opportunity to go to the 9/11 museum with the Big East 2 years ago. And I remember walking out of that museum feeling really heavy, right? Go to the African American Museum here in DC, the Smithsonian, didn't feel heavy enough, because that version of history has been glamorized, sanitized, toned down, right? There's a museum, if you're ever in this area, in Baltimore called the Blacks and Wax. I hope it's still open. That museum, walk out of that joint feeling heavy, because you understand just how brutal slavery is. Like, you walk out of that museum understanding why people are upset that there was a garage pulley, a noose, in Bubba Wallace's garage, right? Yeah. And so when we tell history, you can't tell a watered down version. You have to tell the version that includes ripping people from their homeland, enslaving them, torturing them, governing them by fear. And then when this thing is over, as all these corporate companies are now celebrating Juneteenth, that is only the scratching of the tip of the iceberg of the work in terms of equality. So it's not American to be compassionate. So I understand why white folks are where they are.
What do you think it means to be a real ally?
So I want people to know that being an ally costs. Okay, so Bubba Wallace, the news thing, right? The thing that has struck me, in my mind, is a lose-lose for NASCAR. Because whether it was a garage bully that's been there for 9 months, or it was just put in there to antagonize Bubba Wallace, it's a lose-lose. So we'll just say, since Bubba Wallace is the only full-time driver, black driver, we'll say that for 9 months, let's just say a race a month. I don't know if this is accurate, but we'll say for 9 months that different racers were in there. Their whole crew is white. Nobody looked at this garage pulley and thought, this doesn't look like every other garage pulley. This one looks like a noose, right? So an ally says, hey, somebody should know about this garage pulley because it looks a lot like a noose. Like, I don't know if people were trying to go there, but we don't even want that to be a part of the narrative when it comes to NASCAR. Somebody should do something about this. Then we don't have Bubba Wallace if this is truly a garage bully. You know what I mean? So an ally is going to have to be someone that's willing to insert themselves. There are still spaces that I don't go, Kelly, that you go. And I'm not saying because they are segregated, but that's just the nature of our lives, right? Like, you're far more likely to end up in a space full of white people in the course of a week than I am outside of, like, maybe work. You know what I mean? So when the jokes come, when the inappropriate comments come, challenge your peers, like, challenge your people. That's not, one, it's not historically accurate. It's not funny, because Joe Schmo that was at whatever event that you were at is also the loan officer at the bank who, you can look it up, denied a loan to the black family trying to move into the white neighborhood because that's where the schools were better and they wanted to give their kids a better opportunity. So it all trickles back down.
Monica, how do you ensure that in our space, in the sports media space, that Black people and people of color get a seat at the table in prominent front-facing roles on camera or in decision-making roles behind the scenes?
I don't know that I can ensure it yet, because again, I'm not in talent, but I'm working on it, Kelly. I'm gonna get there. I think you gotta love Black people the way you love Black culture. Quite honestly, there are, we got hockey and NASCAR if Black people didn't play sports. And I'm gonna include baseball because there's a good percentage of baseball players that are Dominican, which, while there's a whole nother conversation there are people of color, right? So if Black people are not a part of the culture, we don't have the big five. We have one of the big five and we have NASCAR. And so if the same appreciation and gratitude for the performance existed for what can be brought in the production space, on camera, the mental aptitude, there would be more balance. I also think, even if you're not going to go that deep and have that much appreciation, I can't tell the story of a frog because I'm not a frog. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I'm covering a bunch of frogs. Like, somebody got to be able to relate to these frogs. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I hate to use animals, but white people just are not as equipped to tell stories of Black people as Black people. And I'm not saying that there are not terrific reporters who are white. That's not what I'm saying. But in the room can't be all white and you're talking about all Black bodies. Like, there's a disconnect. There's just a straight up disconnect.
Do you think we're going to see more, like the segment you were launching in mid-July? And then I was really encouraged. I saw that Carrie Champion and Jamel are not only are they the talent for this new show they're launching, or series Disruptors, they're also executive producing it. Do you think we're going to see more and more of that?
Yes and no. Jamel and Carrie are well accomplished. You know, they're both women that are into their 40s. They are documented. Would somebody at Vice call me up right now and do a show? Probably not, right? You know what I mean? And I think that's such an interesting question, Kelly, because there's some give and take. Would somebody call me right now for that show? Probably not. Is there probably a white chick that somebody probably wouldn't call either? Probably as well, right? We would both be in the same boat. You're not there yet. You don't have the names that are big enough. But her path to get there should be the same as mine, potentially, if we're both working just as hard. Not that she was able to get under the wing of XYZ executive producer or talent director because white blonde women are what we're used to seeing in sports and he saw her potential. It's got to be, hey, I see your potential too. You're both working as hard. Let me lend you the same opportunities. Like that to me is the equity that we would need. I think I like to believe that people are beginning to hear, the people that are in the positions of empowering and selecting talent and producers. I'd like to think that they're sincerely beginning to hear. But it takes a long time to see change. Like Jamel and Carrie, again, I use that phrase unicorn. Like Maria Taylor goes in that bucket with them as well. They're unicorns in terms of their platform and how strong they are in their voices. And then I love Maria, and I thought she bodied First Take when she did it the other day, but
yeah, she did.
She recently, I think, has grown into being comfortable enough to speak on these issues for a board. And she's doing an incredible job. But again, the Black experience is not monolithic. Not everybody is as confident as they rise. But I think workplaces, bosses have to give people room to be who they are and celebrate who they are and see how that celebration can empower and frame the content that they're putting out.
What gives you hope right now?
These conversations, the diversity of the protests. Step one to identifying or changing any problem is identifying it, right? And I do think that it has been identified in a very bright, blatant, and obvious fashion. But again, like I said, the American way is not to be compassionate. And so while COVID, I think, has exposed a lot of things, who knows where we are in the timeline of COVID exactly. But it's going to get tight in this country. And the nature is to protect mine, right? We're not a society that has been necessarily gracious to one another. And so my concern is that as people go back to their first instinct, which is to protect what they have, the cause falls by the wayside. Because at the end of the day, I'm still white and I can move freely about this country, right? Meanwhile, Black communities are continuing to suffer, and that change can't be made if everybody at the protest is simply Black. So I'm hopeful, but I'm concerned. Like it's just not our nature to really look out for folks that don't share our same interests.
You might have just answered my next question, but what gives you pause?
That by nature the American way is selfish. It is excess. It is heaping upon myself and my own. I shouldn't say that I'm fearful because I think this is going to happen, but I am concerned about news fatigue, right? Like, I love that you're reading White Fragility, but how many people across this country truly feel the way you feel, right? Like, I've had great conversations with you and other people in my circle who are similar to you, but my circle of white people stops at 10 max, you know what I mean, that I would consider a friend. So I don't know what those people that voted for our current president in the middle of America, I don't know if they're really hearing. It can't stop. Like this is going to be uncomfortable. This is asking people to step out of themselves and acknowledge the disparities that another group is suffering. And that's just not American.
Hopefully America can start to see the light a little.
I hope so, Cal. In the interim, I'm hopeful. Like in the meantime, right here, right now, in the immediacy, I am hopeful. I'm super proud of these conversations, and I appreciate you for reading that book, for having these conversations. Like, I get it. It's tough to acknowledge your privilege, right? And for me, like, this is the same house that I grew up in. Like, my parents are married. I went to private school all the way through. Like, I have privileges as well. But my skin has not been one of them.
I'm somebody that I embrace not being comfortable. You know, I recognize, I think it's the athlete in me, probably like the athlete in you, that you recognize that to grow and to keep bettering yourself, you have to be uncomfortable.
Yep. And I think the other part of this conversation too that I think is important, as much as I wouldn't change being a Black woman, like I'm not asking you to change who you are either. The part of this conversation is to acknowledge the privilege, like to be my ally. And it's funny because like my dad asked me the other day, He's like, you think Colin Kaepernick should be on a roster over Cam Newton, right? And I was like, oh man, like, whoa. Like Cam, the argument on Cap for me is like, it has nothing to do with football. It just has to do with an apology, like making this thing right. But Cam, in the meantime, is literally like, was just an MVP, 2 years ago? Like, is working on this craft. And so, again, like, what is solidarity going to look like, right? Like, quite frankly, you and I are in the same industry. I don't expect you, I would love it if you do, I don't expect you to call your boss and be like, hey, like, there's not enough Black college football reporters. Hire my girl, I'm going to quit my job. Like, you'd be a saint if you did that. But the reality is, like, you need a job too. You know what I mean? Now, if you are unavailable, like, I hope that your roster of people that might be available would include Black women and that you would be mindful of that. But, like, we're all trying to make it. And so where it intersects in a way that's healthy and doesn't create resentment, like, there's a lot to be navigated and to be figured out.
You were talking earlier in the conversation about you used to, if there was already a Black woman in a role you were seeking, you knew that you were kind of out. And it's interesting because I didn't look at it exactly like that, but I knew that when I applied for jobs, if they already had a female, regardless of what rate, I knew that there was very little chance I was going to get the job. I had this realization, I think when I joined Awesome, honestly, that I used to think I could only be friends so much with like other females in sports. It was a competitive thing, and I knew we were all going for like the same jobs. And then it was when I realized that there's room for everybody at the table. And I think that's the point we have to get to in our industry, is that there is room for everybody, even if we have to make room.
Yep. We got to build a bigger table, and that's okay too. You know what I mean? Like, that's so powerful. My mom says that. She's like, there's two types of people in this world. People that believe there is enough and people that don't. I believe that there is enough. But the part of this conversation that's tricky is like, I believe that there is enough, but I've had to work a little bit harder probably to get to the enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
But this is that conversation, like just acknowledging that society, the system at every level across every industry is not designed with sincere and a depth of diversity in mind.
This was so much fun. Thank you so much for chatting with me. I'm so honored to have you. I'm just so thrilled at like everything you're doing and how much your star has risen.
Gosh, Kelly, I remember when we met. Where Denver?
Denver, the Awesome convention in Denver.
I was like there my first time. I was like, I don't know where my name tag is. Like, I don't know where. And you were so friendly and so warm and so welcoming. And like, I'm glad that we've been able to stay in touch through the years. I appreciate the work that you do, friend. I'm excited for this podcast.
I'm
appreciative of this conversation. I'm excited. I see you as a good one, like as an ally. We're going to move this thing forward.
Yeah, no, I look forward to in the future when we can work side by side on a show or a game. I think that would be so much fun.
So fun, for sure.
All right, well, thank you so much, and let's talk soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Kelly.
Okay.